What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you another look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my trusty co-host Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, how you doing, man?
Doing well, man. New Kung Fu Kenny. At last, 5 years waiting. It's all over. And new Harry Styles. Man, what a time.
Yeah, we're playing a little bit of catch up. We did our best of the weekend rankings last week, so check that out on youtube.com/nostalgiapod. So we have a lot to cover today. We have some big albums that dropped, as you mentioned, Kung Fu Kenny, Kendrick Lamar, and Harry Styles. We have the mid-season finale of Better Call Saul. We have the season finale of Atlanta. We actually had to cut a few things that we wanted to get to from this pod just because there's too much content to get to. So, good time. Well, what a time to be alive! And we got Wayne Jenkins Day next week, which I'm also looking forward to.
Oh gosh, yes.
So, but with all of this good stuff, we're gonna start with Flume, a Australian DJ that we were, as people that don't review a lot of EDM, I think we review like the big artists. We were pretty impressed with, I think what we got from Flume. With I believe Skin in 2016 was really the album where I came onto him, and he's just been kind of present. I think especially our love for the new Pope really like jettisoned some of his music into my zeitgeist with Never Be Like You, and he just dropped a new album titled Palaces.
Yep, third album.
Dave, did this continue the upward trajectory for you of Zoom in your mind?
Yeah, well, I think that the thing with Flume is it's been a while, right? We haven't talked about him, haven't heard much of anything from him since that Hi, This Is Flume mixtape in early 2019. So this is his first release of the pandemic. And I think he's definitely shown a lot of qualities that I like in DJs in terms of the more zany production and varied sonic palette, and just trying to mix it up in a way that's at least interesting to the ear and not as homogenized and monotonous as some other more popular in vogue house music is these days. So Flume is definitely not one of those guys. On the other hand, he does have some more popular traditional stuff. I think of some of his bigger hits, like the Tuvlo song "Say It." More traditional 2010s EDM goes. But I think Flume still has enough going on under the hood that makes him interesting for people that aren't like hardcore electronic music fans. And definitely was looking forward just to hearing what this was going to be, because I really did not know what to expect. And I think Palaces was definitely a fun listen for all those reasons. I thought it was pretty varied and, in a sense, all over the place. But when it comes to electronic music, that's what I want. And just for the sake of things being interesting, that's like a full length listen. If a DJ is going to go beyond being a performer at clubs and actually put out a full length record, I want it to be an engaging listen. I thought the Swedish House Mafia comeback album exceeded my expectations for similar reasons. So I think Flume of Palaces did a pretty admirable job. There was a bunch of songs I thought were pretty cool.
Yeah, in listening to this and thinking about the songs that really stick out to me from Flume, and he definitely pushes the boundaries and is always doing interesting stuff. I think that continued. I think there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff. It sounds very, very modern, I think, is like the word that comes to mind, because I think about like Gex or Charlie XCX. Carolyn Polachek is actually featured on this, but some of her music comes to mind in terms of the production on this, like really stilted and jumbled type production, some real like out there like beat drops and actual music just kind of like dropping out with some very like sparse sounds. So I definitely think there's a lot of things he's going for on here. I found myself at times being a little bit like bored by parts of the album. Not gonna lie, I think his like he can make really beautiful songs, but sometimes it's almost like too beautiful for the sake of like I'm not as interested anymore, and I want the next track to come. But overall, I definitely think this is an admirable addition to his album collection.
Yeah, totally. He talked about decamping to his native Australia during the start of the pandemic and being more attuned with nature during the creation of this album, away from Hollywood and all that. And it's funny, like when you hear some of these songs, they definitely bring like a more like natural sound at times. Some of these
Mhm.
songs, it's like the electronic cacophony of like birds almost without just
Yeah.
making a bird noise. And it's like, huh, cool, interesting. Don't know if I necessarily need to like vibe to the fake sounds of the outdoors. It's a bit unusual, but I think to your point about like the modern sound, there is some pretty blatant hyper pop
Mm.
influence on a few of these tracks. I thought Highest Building,
Oh yeah.
track one, was pretty awesome. You have that vocal melody of the feature Oklo, and then the like repeatedness of the melody in the beat later
Mhm.
on sounded very much like hyperpop, like Gex and all that. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then more on the banger side, you have something like OnlyFans, which also
Mhm.
brings that to mind.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think those two stood out. A couple others that stood out to me, like Escape has that like chime in the beginning that reminds me a lot of some of his earlier stuff, like Never Be Like You. But it actually like becomes a pretty like in like pretty traditional house song for a little bit.
Yeah.
But then it has some like interest. It like brings back that like wind chime in it that I think is like a really nice touch throughout. Um, a song that I'm like 50-50 on his Jasper song.
Mm.
Sometimes when I listen to it, I'm like, man, this piano is just boring me. And then there's other times where I'm like, it starts to become pretty, I don't know, pretty weirdly mixed and stilted, and it like builds on itself. And I'm like, oh no, this is actually like pretty dope. So I don't, that one just kind of grabs me at different points. Did you have any takes on Jasper song?
Yeah, I thought the piano definitely stood out to me. I think if anything, the idea of that song kind of reminds me of the Porter Robinson album
Mm,
that we talked about recently, his comeback album Nurture, which again for the same reasons, like I think a notable uh, EDM album for just kind of engaging you in unusual ways. So yeah, a bit of a synergy there. Um, I think it is cool that Flume is just kind of bringing all kinds of sounds going on. I mean, he cited and actually worked with Sophie a little bit on the High This Is Flume mixtape, and uh, Sophie seems to have rubbed off on Flume in a good way. So, I think to the more traditional side of things, you have track two, Say Nothing, very, very similar to the Tuvelo track of his past, but that Maya feature performance is really strong, you know,
yeah,
tough to argue with that. I didn't love the Carolyn Polachek performance, to be
me
honest. I
neither.
thought it was kind of a weird song, honestly.
Ending the album with Polachek and then Damon Albarn, I had really high expectations, and I thought Palace's ends pretty cool, but Albarn on that is also pretty toned down. However, I think Go, which is in between them,
Yeah.
was like a nice like pick me up near the end of the album, which was kind of needed. I was definitely losing interest by then. So overall, I think Flume continues to just be a creator that I'm interested in, and I like hearing. I think his singles more so than the albums. I think he just kind of like will drop a track, and I'll be like, wow, that's really inventive or creative. So someone to stay tuned into for sure. Let's go forward to Florence and the Machine with Dance Fever. Um, Florence Welch, I mean, man, I gotta say, she is uh she is someone that I feel like I continually forget about. I kind of put her and Brittany Howard in like similar like spheres in my brain where like when they're not making music, I don't find myself going to their music, but then I'll just like stumble onto it and I'll be like, holy shit, like who has a better voice than this person? And really like my takeaway from Dance Fever, while I think the last album we talked about, Highest Hope in 2018, definitely left me a little bit disappointed. I think there weren't as many bangers as some of her earlier stuff, like Ceremonials or Lungs or stuff like that. This feels like a return to form, and it feels like she's like channeling Stevie Nicks throughout this, and it really feels like
Mhm.
her just like letting her voice rip. She's getting super personal lyrically. It's pretty great to see, and I thought this was a really nice album. What was your response to listening to Dance Fever?
Yeah, that's actually a really funny comment too about like where Florence Welch exists in the culture, because Florence and the Machine is this incredibly successful
Mhm.
act, high grossing act, big tours. Florence and the Machine will be doing arenas later this year. Big act. But I feel like I don't think about Florence and the Machine at all in between albums for whatever reason. I think probably because it's just a bit uh, left of center when it comes to pop rock. It's more that baroque pop, indie rock leaning stuff. So I guess that's to be expected. But yeah, I just everything about Florence and the Machine kind of recedes to the back of the mind in between albums, which I guess is a bit unfortunate because, as you said, not that anyone needs to be reminded of this, but Florence Welch just incredible vocalist, like
Mhm.
absolute top tier singer, and continues to wow you, on from song to song, just with these huge performances on these songs that really elevate her ability as a singer. And those like really big Florence and the Machine songs that put Florence Welch's vocals front and center are the songs I really like, and there's a good amount of those on Dance Fever. So overall, I definitely like this album more than Highest Hope.
Yeah, I think that that's a great way to summarize it. And she reminds you who she is right from the first song on this. King is this like slow building, like thumping track, and then it gets to like the 240 mark, and she just comes crushing in with like these amazing high reaching vocals, and it really just like sets the tone for the album. I was really impressed with that as an opening track. So triumphant. It really reminds me of a lot of the stuff from Lungs, like Dog Days and stuff like that. Yeah, and like you said, I think there's a couple other tracks sprinkled throughout here that really fit that mold. But overall, I think just even the sound that she's going for on this feels more in line. The last album was very piano driven and very much like personal, stripped down. You think about like the highlight for me was probably Grace,
Mm.
a song about her sister from that album, and it's a really like quiet piano tune where she's subdued in her vocals, and there's some moments where things are subdued, but it almost always leads in some big crescendo, and I think that works more, especially when it's like guitar driven for her for sure. What other tracks stood out to you? I saw that you were nodding your head to King.
Oh yeah, I think King. That's just a textbook like Florence big chorus. The way the song builds up to that chorus with also a really engaging drum line. Awesome track, awesome single. Uh, then track two I really liked as well, Free, just because that has that more dancing vibe there. And it was interesting to kind of read and listen to Florence talk about the inspiration for this album, which was her kind of fascination with the dancing plague, aka choreomania of the medieval times, Middle Ages, and just the fascination of people just dancing uncontrollably, dancing till they drop, and things like that, and trying to fit that
Hmm.
into her own music. Kind of interesting, I think a song I really enjoyed towards the end there was "My Love," which is super up
Hmm.
tempo. Still has that big uh, Florence chorus, but also probably like the bassiest a Florence and the Machine song can get.
Hmm.
Pretty pop leaning as far as Florence can go. Um, and I think it's pretty interesting to look into this record and see that Jack Antonoff was all over the conception of
Yeah.
this thing. However, I think this is probably one of the better efforts from Jack in quite some time because Jack seemed to be fitting into what Florence and the Machine was doing, and we didn't feel like drowned out by like the textbook trademark Jack Antonoff bedroom pop that's been getting a little old lately as we hear female pop singer after female pop singer do it. This didn't feel like
Yeah.
that.
No, it wasn't sleepy at all, and I think that that was really welcome, because that was my fear, is that she was going to kind of continue in that direction. Um, yeah, I think you really hit some of the highlights for me there. Um, yeah, it's it's nice to hear her trying things, but not really extending beyond what makes her so great. You mentioned that like danciness, which I think is definitely something that comes out in a few of these tracks. But then you get tracks like "Girls Against God," which is really just her like singing so beautifully throughout the whole thing and just carrying it with her vocals, and it has that like typical Florence, like triumphant sound near the end, in terms of the chorus all coming in, her music all kind of swelling at the same time, and it's like, oh yeah, this is why she's been so great, and it's nice to see her like reestablish herself. You mentioned that she's going on this tour, and it's funny because like we talk about this a lot. Who are like the rock headliners? And it's like, I mean, she's really like establishing herself. I mean, it's like her, Chili Peppers. I mean, you gotta think like Arctic Monkeys whenever they tour will be up there. But like,
Yeah, yeah,
who else is really at that top sphere with her? Brittany Howard, if she wanted to be, could be, I
yeah.
suppose.
And especially with Foo Fighters being a bit in limbo
Right,
due to tragic circumstances. Yeah, it's definitely significant. You know, I guess Halsey, if she continued to rock pivot, comes to mind too.
right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, huge act. I mean, she's been a festival draw for a while now, but playing arenas, I think, speaks for itself. Honestly,
Totally.
kind of cool to see if you look at the credits here on this. In addition to Jack Antonoff, you also have Maggie Rogers doing some background vocals. You have Dave Bailey from Glass Animals involved here. Figure that out. Yeah, yeah. I think it was a really awesome album, especially because there's a lot of hype for this or a lot of expectation for this. It's been a long time, 2018 since the
Yeah,
last Florence album. So I think it needed to be uh, a really effective record, especially because High as Hope was a bit middling. So uh, total success for sure.
absolutely. So we're gonna be adding a track from Florence and the Machine onto our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist on Spotify. So search that, check it out, and like it. But let's talk Harry Styles now. The man who is just dominating culture right now. I mean, he is just everywhere, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, he came up with one of the biggest boy bands of all time with One Direction,
Hmm.
being like the clear standout from that group, and has had the most successful solo career. Sorry, Zayn fans, I know that. You actively root against the pod at this point, but yeah, I mean, we've talked about Harry a few times on this podcast. We talked about him just a few weeks ago with Coachella and his Coachella set, which grabbed the zeitgeist. Everybody was talking about. I think people are still talking about.
Yeah, Shania
Um,
Twain, obviously.
and he's doing a big tour right now,
Oh
so
yeah,
people are yeah, people are seeing him, and he's performing. Um, and we don't even need to really get into it, but also a very high profile relationship right
oh yeah.
now that
Well,
is
it's
even
all
more
over
high
the album.
profile.
You kind of got to get into it.
I guess that good point. There's literally a song directly about it, but um,
Put the pop in the
he's
cinema.
yeah, he's everywhere, and you look on Spotify, he's the fourth most played artist in the world in the last month. I think
Yeah,
it's pretty insane. And so we get Harry's house, after Fine Line, which was dubbed one of the 500 greatest albums of all time by Rolling Stone when they updated their list a few years back.
hmm
And I think we liked aspects of Fine Line, but I think a lot of it we were like, I don't know if it totally works for us. So, and I think that was like the main takeaway. It's not a perfect album, and so we get Harry's house, and does this continue to
Mm.
like establish him as an artist? I mean, beyond celebrity, is he now established as like a good artist for to you, Dave?
Huh. Well, now that is the question. Do you want to be in Harry's house? I don't know. I don't know. Fine line, as you said. Work in progress. I think is a charitable interpretation of Harry's second solo album, self-titled debut album. The more rock leading stuff, a sign of the times, and that sign of the times is back with Harry's house, I think. But it's been kind of interesting to see the direction he's taken his sound because he's very far removed, honestly, from self-titled album one.
Mhm.
The rock overtures are basically gone,
Right.
and he's kind of followed through with the biggest hits from Fine Line, Watermelon Sugar, and Golden, and Falling. Those are the tracks that seem to have taken taken root in what the kind of music he wants to make. And with Harry's house, I think that's pretty evident. And the question though is whether Harry's immense celebrity and popularity and likability and all those things, whether that's actually matched with a fully formed musical identity. He clearly did not have a musical identity on Fine Line. That was pretty obvious. And I'm still a bit skeptical of if he has one now. because I think Harry's house is incredibly safe,
Yeah.
and I don't want to say low effort, but
No.
he hasn't gotten really any deeper with his lyrics, and that's totally fine, totally cool. And he's an A-lister, you know. It's
Yeah.
not like we need him to be Bob Dylan or anything.
Mhm.
But given the comparisons he's kind of openly invited and people have attached themselves to him, like Joni Mitchell or Mick Jagger's recent comments, I just don't think like the body of work has been established to this point for me. Clearly, for other people, it has, because as you said, he's going to be on one of probably the second biggest tour of the year behind Bad Bunny in
Mhm.
terms of total dollars earned. Perhaps BTS is above them too. I mean, he's on basically a nonstop tour until the end of next year. Next year, he'll be playing 10 shows in a row at Madison Square Garden and 10 shows in a row at the Forum in LA. Like, he's an absolute superstar, and he's going to
Yeah.
have the biggest first week sales of the year. 450 to 500,000 is the projection right now. So he's successful. He doesn't need any advice from me, but I still think he's a bit of a work in progress. And at the very least, I think we will continue to hear probably new directions in the future, because I just don't think he really went in a new direction from Fine Line at Harry's house. It sounds kind of the same in the sense that it's kind of undecided to me still.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all spot on. The question for me becomes like, does he need to be pushing those lyrical boundaries, getting deep? Because, like you said, his music has become incredibly popular on TikTok
Hmm.
just because it's kind of made for that, and it's not only that his fan base is skews younger. A lot of the people using TikTok, I think, grew up with One Direction and then Harry's couple of albums. So it's a lot of fans just already kind of leaning towards how do we use the Harry song here. But like those moments, like the as it was, like aha, take on me type thing is like perfectly made for like a montage of pictures or videos, and it's like when you make stuff like that, like why do you have to? It's kind of like the Jack Harlow debate, almost in a sense. It's like, does he
Yeah,
really have to push himself to be better when he can make these like 30-second clips and people are like, oh fuck, this is like the best thing I could possibly put over this like image of my dog doing this or this dance I'm
right.
doing, you know?
But surely the guy
He's
is going to be in perhaps the third highest grossing tour of the year. Surely we can ask for a little bit more
well,
musical quality, right?
I have to say I do think this is a step up, and it feels a
I
little bit
agree
more
it's better.
cohesive from
I
Fine
do
Line.
agree it's better.
And it starts off right away with music for a sushi restaurant, which I think is like a very like
Mm,
fun track. It's like
yeah,
toned down.
groovy.
Yeah, groovy is a good word for it. And then it hits that like ending like 80s like I don't know, like Prince almost sounding like like the horns kind of pop in and it's just so fun. As it was just a few tracks later, I think is a really fun song. And it's actually kind of funny because I think that this album could have felt a little bit more deep. Like as it was, for example, has a whole like third person point where he's basically like talking about like being lonely, like mental health issues, feeling disconnected from people. And there's a world where he makes that like a stripped down acoustic song, similar to like what's the one from like Cherry or something like that from
Mm,
the last album, and it feels a lot deeper, but because he kind of keeps it at this like 70s 80s light pop sound throughout a lot of the record, you don't really sink into those lyrics as deeply. And so I think intentionally he's trying to like expose what parts of himself he feels like he wants to, but in like the safest way possible. Like you mentioned, he keeps it always upbeat, always kind of moving. The only track that kind of I think bumps up against that is Matilda, which I think I've seen a lot of love from Harry fans about, being a track that's pretty thoughtful about a woman who's been like abused and just like not kind of given the love that he feels like she deserves. And I think that that's a track where he tried to kind of go in that deep direction. But yeah, a lot of it he wants it to just be fun, and why not? Like you're selling out these arenas, you got really gonna make people come and like listen to you just like strum on a guitar.
yeah, well, I, I think for me though, like I don't think of As It Was, which is already a number one song, already over half a billion plays on Spotify. Crazy big song already. I don't think of that song as like super fun just because it's so light. You know,
Oh,
it's like
really?
it I don't know, it's just kind of quiet to me. Like
Hmm.
I don't think the production does enough for me. I mean, there's been a lot of comparisons to Aha, as you said, but I think the Harry songs I enjoy the most are I just need a little bit more on the production side of things. I think of like Sunflower Volume 6 off Fine Line, for
Hmm.
example. Music for a Sushi Restaurant comes to mind here. I really love the tempo on, or really just the whole like pulsing production on Late Night Talking, track
Hmm.
2 on Harry's House, with the synths going on in there. I think it's the quieter, softer stuff for me. Is just I just find it a little dull still from Harry, just because I feel like his performance is intentionally so down the middle. I don't just don't find it as engaging as something that is a little funner, like Little Freak or something. You know?
Yeah. I think that's fair. The second half of this album, I definitely was not as much of a fan of. But I like a song like "Boyfriends," which he's obviously going for some sort of like feminist perspective here. Um, Definitely did not work for me as well. It didn't grab me as well, but I'm sure a lot of his fans, a lot of his female fans, will probably really gravitate towards that songs, or even his like queer fans will probably go for a song like that as well. Um, I think cinema and then daydreaming back to back was probably like the last time I really like
Yeah,
was like, oh, I'm enjoying these tracks. And cinema, we kind of mentioned, alludes to his relationship with Olivia Wilde. I think referring to her as the cinema and
yeah.
him as the pop, which
Put the
is,
pop in the cinema, baby.
man, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a bunch of references to Livy all over the album here and there, but that's definitely the most overt,
Yeah,
song about her, of course.
yeah. So that and daydreaming were like two tracks that stood out. Feels like he's been listening to like more recent like I don't know, Vampire Weekend maybe. How it was like a little bit more like
Yeah,
poppy and like I don't know, 80s 70s infused on
it's
it.
funny.
Kind of like a weird turn for him, but okay,
Yeah,
sure, I'm here for it.
right. Yeah, I like Daydreaming as well for the production. I also thought
Hmm.
Satellites was at least notable because it's pretty obvious example of the current '80s new wave pop influence that we hear all the time now from mainstream artists. Uh, yeah, so I think overall the production on Harry's House at least was more interesting to me than Fine Line. I think lyrically is still probably kind of at the same level. Perhaps he's a bit more playful on Harry's House. Like even if it's not like the most like expertly written prose or anything, he just has like funny lines. Whether he's talking about food, whether he's horny, whether he's referencing offhand doing coke, whatever it is. Like it at least is like I think funny, fun, more enjoyable wordplay this
Hmm.
time around. So yeah, I think it's definitely a step up. But like I said, I think there's pretty obvious to expect more genre pivots in the future from
Yeah.
Harry Styles. For someone who kind of openly expresses, or references like gender fluidity and more queer fashion, but will never actually comment on it or acknowledge it at all. I'd have to imagine he has a similar kind of view to his own art, and I'm sure we'll hear that in time. But in the meantime, we're going to hear a lot of Harry all the time because he's going to be touring until the end of next year. And
Hmm.
of course, he's in a high profile celebrity relationship as well. So uh, Harry Styles will be around for the very foreseeable future to the delight of millions of people, obviously.
Absolutely. We'll be adding a track onto our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist. But let's move on to an album that came out 2 weeks ago. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers from Kendrick Lamar. Damn, it's been a minute, man. 2017, we talked about Damn. We haven't really heard much from Mr. Kendrick until this album dropped. I mean, I guess we got a single the week before, right? The Heart Part 5. Um,
Yeah.
Give me your quick review of that track.
Well, it was just cool to hear another entry in the Heart series, a decade plus spanning single set of songs that Kendrick Lamar has released, usually in the anticipation of his forthcoming albums. I believe Heart Part 2 is actually on his mixtape overly dedicated. The subsequent 3, 4, 5 have all been one-off singles. 4, of course, was in the lead up to Damn. Now we have 5, notable music video, deepfakes of Nipsey Hussle and Kanye West and
Jussie Smollett,
Kobe Bryant. Yep, Smollett.
OJ.
Uh, in a sense, setting the tone in a little bit for what to expect from Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. It's not my favorite of the Heart series. I think Part 4 is probably still my favorite, but I think it was just really cool that he released another one of these tracks. And I swear to God, I had really been thinking of, God, is he going to release another Heart song before this album? Because once we knew for sure that Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers was coming, and then he does it like the next day, I felt really smart, even if it was probably really obvious. But as you said, Kendrick's been gone. You know that's he's very unique in hip hop for this in this manner that he can be more or less absent for. I mean, it's been 5 years since the album. We had that Black Panther soundtrack at the beginning of 2018. That was probably the last gasp of when we heard him. The tours, once the tours stopped in 2018. Since then, though, completely silent. He doesn't talk about stuff. He's just a ghost,
Yeah,
and we
he
didn't
did
really
a
hear
few
anything.
features with Keem, but other
Yeah,
than
and then
that,
he pops back up with Keem because Keem's his cousin and now signed to his new record label, PG Lang. It's like even then it was like someone super connected to him that he would bother to, you know, be around for. And now we know that this is his final album for TDE, Top Dog Entertainment, a label he's been signed to since 2005. We still don't really know what extent PG Lang is as a multimedia enterprise. So we just know him and Keem are involved, and Dave Free helped Kendrick found it. So a lot of TBD there. But regardless, it's the final TDE record, and obviously the last Kendrick album for some time. If we're being honest, I doubt he's gonna come back super soon again. But who knows? Maybe in a sense, this was him just kind of getting out of his deal, and he's gonna rush back soon, a la Frank Ocean. Who can say? But obviously, a ton of anticipation for Kendrick, and it's sold over 300,000, almost 300,000 first week with no physical albums available to purchase. So, still pretty impressive for an artist who is more or less completely absent. The anti Drake. Drake is never gone. Kendrick is usually always gone, and now Kendrick's back, and it's not the album I expected to hear, but it's still very much a Kendrick Lamar album, and I think very interesting.
yeah, you mentioned how you expect Kendrick to take some time off, and I totally agree. His albums are so dense. I mean, like literally, you could dissect this, and we're gonna do our best to kind of highlight some of the biggest points. But there's so much in these albums, and so much that he's going for thematically, lyrically, that it's a lot to work through. And we're going to be doing a Kendrick Lamar rankings of all of his albums a little bit later on. So we're not going to be talking about where this falls today. I actually don't think I could talk about where it falls today because I want to listen like one or two more times to really get a sense of it and see how it sticks with me. So we just want to put that out there. Anyways, we got the album. You turn it on, you give it a listen, and you said it wasn't the album you expected, but did you leave this album satisfied? Were you like, Kendrick still got it, man?
Oh, he's definitely still got it. And I think the bigger question is whether I want to run this one back a lot versus running back his other records. To
Mm,
Pimp a Butterfly was on my best albums of the decade list. Money Trees from Good Kid, Mad City was on my best songs of the decade list.
hmm
You know, Damn, a huge record, the only hip hop album to win the Pulitzer Prize. Like
Pretty big.
there's a big body of work to live up to at this point. This is his fifth album, and there's of course the mixtapes and the compilations and everything. And I don't know. I could probably say I do know that I don't want to listen to this one as much as the other ones in terms of like picking out individual songs that I like. But I still have a lot of admiration for a lot of what's going on here, and I think it's a very interesting and probably important record for how Kendrick is approaching his artistry because it's his first album to be anywhere close to this personal.
Mm,
And you think about it on the surface, like, oh, well, Good Kid, Mad City is about his youth and his coming of age, and To Pimp a Butterfly is about his role in society as a black man. But those are a bit more surface level, or at least guarded looks. Tim and Butterfly, much more top level societal things, right?
Mhm.
Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is Kendrick really peeling back and showing you who he really is and not being afraid to show some warts and blemishes and things people might not like to hear or find out about. And I think that's really interesting because, I mean, how many other artists could actually pull something like this off in as compelling a way as Kenny? Now,
Mhm.
again, that doesn't mean I want to listen to some of these songs all the time. Like the joint with Taylor Page, I'm not going to listen to that again. We cried
Oh,
together.
you don't wanna hear them screaming at each other for,
I
4 minutes?
can't say I do,
Literally
but
screaming too. Taylor Page was, like, losing her voice during it. Amazing performance from her, but, like, yeah,
yeah,
not what I wanna roll back all the time.
right.
You're not at the party and you're like, "Let's put on Cry Together right now."
I think not, but there's still a lot of things to, like you said, digest about this album, and it's certainly not boring.
No, definitely not. It's kind of like split, right? So it's an 18 track album, runs about an hour
Yeah,
12, hour 13,
he
and
teased it as a double album, even though
yeah,
it's actually shorter than some of his other albums. But yeah, it's technically two sides: Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers.
and there's a lot of parallels there, in terms of like the track listing, the songs, and how they kind of like align with each other. If you did split them down the middle, I have to say I did not take the time to kind of like piece those together yet and piece together the symmetry on it. Did you do that, Dave?
No, again,
No.
it's one of the huge failures of uh,
Spotify.
digital DSPs, digital streaming platforms, that they don't make something like that evident when it's like a dual disc situation.
But I definitely think that there's a lot to like on here, and like you said, I think some moments and some choices that probably aren't going to find me coming back to it. Um, and it kind of starts right away with United in Grief for me, which was like a very like disjointed and like very I'm not even sure exactly how to describe it. I think the first thing that came to mind was it felt like a song that could have been on Untitled Unmastered almost in a
Mm,
sense. It was like so like stilted and like
yeah.
kind of like jumping around from sound and what it was going for that I was like, "Huh, this is are we going to be getting this all album?" Luckily, the next track N95, which I really like, was a lot more traditional sounding as a track, but it feels a lot like a Kendrick thing to kind of put this very challenging, very singular song right at the beginning, and he's like, "This is what you're gonna get," and like you're either gonna sit with it or not. And I appreciate that. Although,
Mm,
like I said, United in Grief, not a track I'm gonna run back. Although I do like when the drums kind of come in at that like I
yeah.
don't know minute mark. It's pretty cool.
Classic example of, like, the Kenny voice as it is. Uh, but yeah, like, he grieves different. Got it. But
Mhm.
yeah, N95 has been the biggest hit to this point. And when you see that title, it's like, oh god, what's he gonna go on about masks
Yeah.
or the vaccine, or it's like,
Hmm.
I hope he doesn't say something I don't want to hear. And it's not that he hasn't expressed, like, questionable views or anything before. He certainly has. He did it on Damn, if you go and listen for it, which is totally fine, obviously. But I think N95, like doing it, whether it's the "you out of pocket" refrain, or
Yeah.
just the overall aggression. Once he
Hmm.
builds up to it, reminds me a lot of DNA.
Yeah.
Uh,
Good
off
point.
Damn, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. I also like his ad libs. You ugly as fuck. Like just so random, but I appreciate it. And I think the taking the mask off type of thing was like a clever way to like frame it, even if
Mm,
like it's coming at a time when COVID numbers are rising again in the country. So maybe not the message we want to be sending. But anyways, I think that song rips. A few tracks later, Father Time with Sampha, I
oh
really
my
love. And hearing
gosh.
Sampha back on the track, man, I was like, just give us the album, dog. Just do it. We need it. The people need it.
We have had Kendrick Lamar come back. First album since 2017. We're still waiting for Rihanna and Frank Ocean for an album since 2016. You know what? After that, and my beloved ASAP Rocky 2018. Sampha, though, we haven't had a Sampha album since 2017. And every time we hear him on someone else's song, it's amazing. I
Hmm.
think whether it's Kendrick Lamar Heady One, the Drake cuts back in the day, of course, Solange. He's batting 1,000 on these features. It's just incredible.
Mhm.
Neat No Chaser, baby. Oh
Yeah.
my god, it's such a good performance.
No chaser. Yeah, no, that's definitely a standout to me. What other tracks like stood out to you? What did you like?
Well, honestly, Kendrick on Father Time too. I really like the storytelling on there. I love the
Hmm.
production too, the way the beat drops in, but just the presence of the keys there. And then Kendrick just being like, when Kanye got back with Drake, I was very confused, and basically saying that like he doesn't think he could have done that if he was in that situation. It's like, man, he went there. I love
Hmm.
to hear it. Also shows how recent some of these songs are because he's directly referencing something from last December.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think Father Times. I think it's honestly my favorite track on the
Hmm.
album overall. Um, but I liked a lot of other stuff too. I thought Die Hard was pretty cool. I thought the Blast feature was very strong, coming off a really strong feature on the Kalani album we just got, and I thought Kendrick was really great on Die Hard. Um, Rich Spirit has been getting a lot of love. I think the hook, the flow is a bit different from Kendrick there. I think the production, little tweaks there, here and there, are really cool. Uh, I thought Count Me Out, his flow again on there, really fun. The choir there in the background, really nice. Silent Hill with Kodak Black, I think, is a really good song, and then kind of brings to the fore that it's like you hear Kodak Black on this. I think you hear him first on the interlude, then you keep hearing Kodak Black on the record. And it's like
Yeah.
it's been a huge talking point. Obviously, is it a provocation? What is the intent behind an album where he's kind of talking and shedding so much light about his family and what his mother went through, and Kendrick's complicated relationship with his own women in his life, whether it's his mom or his fiance, whatever it is. And then you have the repeated presence of someone who has been, directly charged with domestic violence and whatnot
Hmm.
in Kodak Black, and it's like, on the other hand, he's far from the like I think Craig Jenkins put this really well in his review. Most rappers, or if you made a list of rappers that didn't associate with people associated with domestic violence, it'd be very short. So
Hmm.
I think it's just, for me, it's like just kind of weird to hear like Kodak be like a narrator of a big portion of this album, given the themes of the album, when clearly Kodak Black as a person through his own actions is at odds with those themes. This definitely took me aback.
Yeah, I definitely thought that was a weird choice, but Kendrick is also very thoughtful, and he might have picked Kodak out to be provocative. He might have been trying to say something, given some of the themes of the album. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah,
Only Kendrick really has that answer, and I doubt he's going to explicitly tell us.
he
So
ain't gonna say anything.
yeah, so speculate away. For me, I mean, it definitely like stood out, but I was able to get past it and just kind of, like you
Mhm.
said, kind of mark it up to like a lot of rappers associate with people like this. Although Kendrick is kind of at a different level, and maybe we should expect more from him on that. Um, just kind of moving forward though through the album and tracks I liked. I thought Purple Hearts, the track after We Cried Together, was very similar to Love off Damn, and just kind of that like duet with a female artist, Summer Walker in this case. But I had a Ghostface Killa feature at the end, which I was like, damn, Ghostface still got it, man. He came on, kind of crushed it, and just got out like a minute left in the song, and that was so welcome to hear. Um, yeah, what other tracks I like here? I think one that we probably should talk about
Oh, yeah,
is Auntie Diaries.
yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there in a second. But what other tracks were you digging
Hmm.
as you went through?
Yeah, we I don't have anything else more to say about We Cried Together. I actually don't even know how effective I find it, just because it's like beating you over the head repeatedly. And I think the subtlety's honestly kind of lost. I thought Taylor Page was really crushing it. Wouldn't mind hearing her dabble in a mixtape, kind of like when I heard Zoe Kravitz on Ray Shremmerd back in the day.
Mm,
But I, yeah, I don't know. I thought it was just grating, honestly. And not what I
It's a tough
expect from
listen.
Kendrick. Uh, I think just thematically, it's really interesting overall on this album. It's like Kendrick peeling back things about himself and his feelings, and like what he says on a few different tracks about like cancel culture and people holding their tongue and you're killing artists. And I find it interesting that like I'm not surprised that he has these feelings about these things. If you remember back when Spotify was gonna not promote XXXTentacion on playlists due to allegations against him, Kendrick came out of his cave
Mhm.
unprovoked and spoke out against that action, and of course that was pulled back anyway. Kendrick has like a lot of like really specific thoughts about things, and hearing him kind of talk, you know, reference Kyrie Irving and like talk about like uh, people having to sign their own wills if they speak out of line and stuff. It's kind of interesting to hear him point these things out because, like, I want to know, like, what are like the thoughts that you have that you feel like you're not allowed to share. You
Mhm.
know, later on the record, he's like, he kind of references how he's been like put on this huge pedestal by society and by white people and all that, and like how he's like, he's very aware of his own misgivings and insecurities and shortcomings as a person, and he gets into that, as a man in his relationship and things like that later. But I'm curious, is like, are you just kind of saying this as a point of view because that's how you feel, or do you actually have more to say on the matter that you're
Mhm.
just holding back because he doesn't actually take it any further? I thought it was kind of weird to like bring something like that up, but then kind of like keep it moving and move on and look back on yourself again. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a interesting point. Especially, I think the song that you're referencing probably is "Savior" with
Mm,
Keem, where he kind of talks about
yeah.
that, like being put on that pedestal and kind of being seen as like the savior of rap, but also of like racial politics and like a voice for like change in the country. I mean, when you make a album like "To Pimp a Butterfly," people are going to, I think, naturally kind of think that of you. You know, that he obviously had a singular vision for that album, executed it perfectly. An incredibly thoughtful album. To some people, it's considered the best album of all time. That's how, you know. That's how well it was made and and conceived. And so, I wonder though, like, are there people out there that, like, when something happens, like when there's a murder of a black man or a black woman, are people like, I got to hear from Kendrick on this? Like, we got to get Kendrick in front of a camera and talk about this, or is he feeling, because he gets so much notoriety for his thoughtfulness on these albums, that potentially he feels this pressure, even though
Mm,
maybe the expectations aren't there as well? I don't know.
yeah.
I know I don't necessarily look for Kendrick to be like the voice of all black people or racial politics in the United States in general. He definitely makes interesting songs about it, and I think very thoughtful songs about it.
Right.
But yeah, I think some of that like savior complex might also be self-imposed in some way. Um, but I agree. I'd like to hear him talk a little bit further about it and expand on it, or because I'm sure it's not just, yeah, I have all this pressure and then no other thoughts about it. That's not really who Kendrick has proven himself to be.
Mm.
Um, kind of looking down the track though. I mean, after Savior, which I thought Savior was okay. It Crown comes a few songs before it, and I've seen people kind of being lukewarm on Crown. How did that track hit for you? It's very toned back for him.
Yeah, not my favorite for sure. I like Savior more. I actually thought Keem was pretty solid on this. I know some people still a bit lukewarm on Keem as a performer. I was a big fan of the Melodic Blue last year, um, and I thought him and Kendrick have a pretty good chemistry. I like Savior a bit more. Yeah, Crown definitely uh, one of my least favorite tracks.
Yeah, I agree. Didn't totally work for me, but I know some people are really getting some love for it. So Auntie Diaries has been a pretty controversial song, a track where Kendrick is really storytelling about a aunt who was a trans female,
Mm,
and basically how he originally was taught to perceive people in the trans community, and then how his perspective grew over time and as he was educated. And um, what it's really been drawing a lot of criticism for is his use of the F slur in regards to people in the LGBTQIA plus community. And I think there's a couple ways to look at it. I think overall the message Kendrick wants you to take away is like a lot of people in the black community have the perspective that I had towards this, the
Mm,
LGBTQIA plus community, specifically the trans community, and had this very bigoted perspective. And as I had this personal experience, I grew to see and
mm,
understand what these people go through, and in his mind, legitimize their existence. Um, I do think he could have gone about it a little differently. I think he uses the F slur about like 10 times on
yeah.
this track, and maybe tone it back about 10 times. But I think overall, like the message was good, execution not so great. Where'd you fall on it though?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, you know, saying my auntie is a man now,
Yeah.
that's yeah, I think that's kind of like the crux of it for me. It's like you have these good intentions. Pretty sure I understand what you're saying and how you think. And good. Overall, if this song has positive impact in that way on other people making that connection, good. Good thing.
Hmm.
But he's doing it in a very ham-fisted way.
Hmm.
If you're gonna dead name your aunt, you know,
Yeah.
you're gonna use the F slur a million times. It's it's just not as effective as you think it is. I think it's really
Hmm.
ham-fisted and really pales in comparison to something quite similar to this, which would be "Smile" by Jay Z off 444,
Hmm.
where he talks and reveals about his mother coming out of the closet publicly.
Hmm.
I think Jay Z handled that with significantly more grace than Kenny being like, "Oh, my auntie is a man now," and like he's like processing how he was thinking. I
Hmm.
get it, but the way he's putting it out there publicly, I just found it a bit crass, and it's also been very frustrating to see Kendrick fans push back on criticism of this song, especially criticism in the queer community, um, because trans people shouldn't have to like explain why this song isn't as good as it should be. That's also very unfair to them. So I think people should be a bit more open to listening to that kind of criticism. Yeah, overall, I just don't think it's actually good allyship. A song
No.
like this, it's well intentioned for sure, but it's not actually in execution good allyship. So frustrating misstep for someone that we associate with so much greatness, like Kendrick.
Hmm.
He's held up as a great storyteller, a great songwriter, but that was not good songwriting.
Yeah, I completely agree. After Auntie Diaries, you only have a few more tracks on this. You have Mr. Morale, the title track, Mother, Sober, and Mirror. Did any of those hit for you, or did it kind of fizzle
Yeah.
out from there?
Well, I think Mother I Sober is a huge highlight because
Hmm.
that's where Kendrick talks about was it his mother's sexual assault in the past and how he reckoned with that. And is that also where he talks about his own sex addiction? Like
I think so.
the foul taste of Auntie Diaries is washed out pretty quickly because then you have this amazing storytelling once again from Kendrick. Super personal, as personal as he's ever been. That like I think a song like that's like kind of the ethos of Mr. Round and the Big Steppers because that is an example of what's so new about this album for Kendrick's standards because he was never that personal before.
Hmm. Yeah, and the way he delivers it even is in like this hushed like tone, kind of whispering almost, and I think it really adds to the meaning behind it, and kind of the way he's sharing this. It feels very intimate, which I like. So yeah, we kind of jumped around, but I think there were probably like 9 or 10 tracks that we really liked and thought were pretty good. A couple that were missteps, and I think everything else in between. I mean, there's a couple like interludes and things like that, but for the most part a lot of this album hit for us. Um, I'm I'm kind of left sitting with it. Just in general, if it's not up there with "To Pimp a Butterfly" in my mind, or even "Good Kid, Mad City," but is it falling near "Damn"? "Damn." I think a more like commercialized perspective
Correct.
from Kendrick, and this a much more personal perspective. Do they kind of fall on the same level? I don't know. This is kind of where I'm thinking with my rankings as we talk. So.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely the crux of it right there. And we will do Kendrick Lamar full rankings. And there's a lot to talk about because he's got more than just albums, too. So looking forward to handling that in full later in the year. So make sure you subscribe at youtube.com/nostalgiapod so you don't miss when those rankings do go live.
Stay plugging. All right, we're done with music for today. We're gonna move on to TV, where Made for Love season two has dropped on HBO,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the full thing is out. And Dave, I mean, just give me your quick feelings on season one of Made for Love, where you were a fan, if I remember.
Oh yeah, I thought Made for Love season one was really strong and also really surprising because it came out of nowhere and was really that first HBO Max original series that I pay attention to and really enjoyed. And of course, Hacks would quickly follow suit there. But awesome Kristen Milioti vehicle, part of a huge year for her, alongside, of course, Hulu's Palm Springs, which she is the star as well.
Hmm.
And it was just a really, I think, fun half hour about lampooning big tech and everything going on with all those dystopian themes that are a bit familiar. It's not necessarily that we went on any super new lanes or anything here. We kind of understand all of these themes already, but the Milioti performance, the Billy Magnuson performance, the Ray Romano performance, all very winning. I thought Milioti and Magnuson have really awesome chemistry that just made it really really fun season, fun series. And I think Made for Love season two coming back when it did during this huge glut of April and May 2022, we're getting so much television before the Emmy deadline. Just I'm not seeing really any coverage of Made for Love season two at all. I think people have let this one slide because there's so much else on TV. And I find that a bit unfortunate because I thought season two actually exceeded my expectations because it switched things up in a way I didn't expect.
Yeah, season one, I think, really stood out, like you said, as this like take and this satire on big tech, but also I think it asked some like interesting questions about like partnership, and like personal sacrifice for people that you love. And season two, I mean, I think it just ratchets everything up to like the next level, and conceptually, I think is like a bit out there in some ways. By the end of the season, I mean, you're totally in like trippy, like I did I take a LSD tab before I watched these last few episodes type territory. But it all really hits, and like you said, you get some really great performances from the top three build there, right? Kristen Milioti, Billy Magnuson, and Ray Romano. And I think Romano, especially in the second season, really stood out to me. Obviously, he's been doing some more like serious roles in the last 5 to 7 years. So it's great to see him continue on that. But overall, I thought season two kind of continued season one's success. I don't know if I liked it more than season one. I think there's some things that didn't totally work for me, but there's definitely some really fun parts to it that I found myself laughing and just wanting to kind of keep being with these characters. You felt the same way?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think what I really enjoyed about season two is that there's an important switch up that we're not seeing Hazel trying to escape the hub again. She's not trying to
Right.
escape Magnuson. She is in the hub with him and is kind of like an agent on the inside. And I just really like how they kind of flipped that around.
Mhm.
Obviously, our ending position for this series sets up a vastly different season three if we are to get a season three. It has not been renewed at this time. But once we start really going deep into the AI stuff, and they really just continue where season one left us, where we get revealed that Hazel has a chip in her head. And they take it so much farther. I really like that I didn't just kind of run back the core plot mechanics of season one. So the fact that we switched that up a bit makes it interesting enough that you can just really sit with and love those three central performances. And meanwhile, what's his name? Jay Jackson, the Dro from Insecure.
Jasper.
Yeah, the guy who plays Jasper, elevated series regular here. You get a bit of Russ Hanneman again from Silicon Valley. Um, yeah, I think it's pretty fun, and it's also, it doesn't wear out its welcome. It's only 4 hours.
Yeah, Russ Hanneman is just absolutely dynamite in this. His name is Chris DM Topolos. I
Yeah,
definitely butchered the last
Dematopoulos, yeah.
name. My apologies.
Greek.
But yeah, he's just hilarious every time he pops up, and him and his buddy like basically failing their way to the top of the FBI is just hilarious and such a I feel like a funny comment on that agency in general. But yeah, I think you mentioned a really good point, which is by flipping the power dynamic on this season, right? So you have Byron basically trying to win Hazel back by giving her whatever she wants with all this, control within Goggle, letting her like spend time with her dad, taking care of him, like all this stuff is really nice because not only does it allow you to kind of like sympathize and I think builds up Byron as a character, as someone that you can at least like a little bit, and he becomes enjoyable to spend time with. Whereas there were times in season one where he's just like so despicable and so unhuman. It's like, okay, well, it's hard to totally mesh with a robot all the time. But it really allows all the other parts of the show to kind of soften as well. Like the stuff with Zelda, I found to be really funny and just kind of like a good hang. Whereas in season one, Zelda was like such a main part about like how Hazel was going to escape, and even though I liked that as like a twist to it all, I definitely think giving Zelda a voice and letting her like develop these relationships, I found to be pretty fun. I think it also kind of allowed the show to be uh, about Hazel reckoning with herself, which I find to be a lot more interesting than her reckoning with this abusive relationship. And obviously, that's kind of like they hit you over the head with it by having
Mm.
her consciousness literally take over her body and do like a very Legion esque episode where it's like bad Hazel versus original
Yeah,
Hazel, or
right.
conscious Hazel versus original Hazel. But I think it all still like worked and was pretty interesting to watch.
Totally. Yeah, I thought Magnuson did a really nice job too, because again, his character is on the back foot this time. It's a different side of Byron, but I think he's really just proven himself as a winning performer. I thought it was fantastic. In No Time to Die should have been the main villain, if we're
Yeah,
being honest, and
agree.
he's already proven himself in other smaller roles like Game Night. But at the end of the day, the show's really a Milioti vehicle, and she's just really just dynamite in the role. So I look forward to a season three if they do move forward with one.
Yeah, and just to kind of highlight one of the points I made at the beginning, I think Romano, especially in those later episodes when he's, talking to Hazel about wanting to pass away on his own terms and stuff like that, I thought that was really effective from him. And seeing him just kind of like enjoy what's it called, the sphere or the
The
hub,
hub. Mhm.
enjoy like everything that the hub has to offer, I thought was like really fun, and like it's nice
Yeah,
to like see someone taking advantage of it that way.
yeah,
um and then to kind of get like the emotional moments at the end, I was like, Ray Romano, man, he's a talented
right.
guy. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I
So
thought they made a nice choice for he quickly got on to the fact that they were drugging him and treating his cancer. Like they didn't play that out. They got to more interesting material, which, as you said, was him in the hub and playing things off and playing dumb and everything like that. So yeah, I
yeah,
think
it
Romano's
was really
probably
good.
the MVP of the series just because he brings so much to that part, as you said.
Absolutely. Well, we hope that season three comes back, but let's move forward to season one of a show that dropped on Hulu this past weekend, Conversations with Friends.
Mm,
The Sally Rooney novel that's been adapted by Hulu again after Normal People, which check out a review on Normal People. Search Normal People Nostalgia Pod. Um, yeah, Normal People was just it was a moment, a pandemic moment. People just found it and loved it, and it's kind of amazing to think about. I mean, where does it sit in your mind now that we're like a few
mm.
years removed from it?
Right. I love Normal People, the series. I have not read the Sally Rooney novel. I haven't read Conversations with Friends or her third novel that came out last year. Conversations with Friends, notably the debut Rooney novel, Normal People, the debut Rooney adaptation. I thought that Normal People was fantastic. I think it was my number four show 2020, absolutely loved it. I think obviously a huge part of it is that Paul Mescal and Daisy Edgar Jones, two star-making performances, just blow up your screen chemistry between them. But the show, with Lenny Aberson's direction and Alice Birch's writing, who are back again for Conversation with Friends, they brought, I think, a real intentional approach to the intimacy of Connell and Marianne and normal people
Mhm.
that was really mind blowing. And on top of that, sex scenes between two really hot people were also really good while still being very tasteless. So something for everyone in that regards. I think normal people in hindsight makes a lot of sense as that first adaptation, even though it's the second book, because normal people is a bit more traditional. It's a love story between two people, and we get to see both of their point of views. Conversation with Friends is a bit messier because we really only have one point of view, but it's about this complicated web of relationships between four people. So a bit more challenging to have all those things be more harmonious than normal people, which I think was a bit more straightforward to tell us a story.
Yeah, when I think about normal people, I think about just the electricity and the chemistry between Paul Mescal and Daisy Edgar Jones, and it's just like, that unfairly, I think Conversations with Friends is going to be compared to this, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, how are you going to replicate that once in a lifetime chemistry between these two unknown leads? It didn't happen, and I think for that, this series left me just not as engaged as I was with normal people. I still think there's some good performances, but it really unfairly in my mind I'm like, oh well, this isn't that, or it's not
Hmm.
not that moment for normal people, and I think there's still some good storytelling here, but
Yeah.
it just wasn't normal people, and it's a hard perspective I think to like put it up against it.
Yeah, I mean, this is on BBC across the pond, but here in the States, it's on Hulu, and I keep seeing Hulu ads for an upcoming film. Was it where the Crawdads sing, starring Daisy Edgar Jones? I keep getting reminded of her because she's obviously blowing up right now, having a huge year with that and Under the Banner of Heaven and Fresh, obviously, and more to come, surely. But yeah, I keep being like, wow, you know what, Joe Alwyn, you're not as fun to look at as Paul Mescal, you know.
Still incredibly handsome. I
He
mean,
is, yeah.
just like
And,
crazy.
and
Like,
then Alison Oliver in her first role as Frances. It's like, well, I see some similarities to Marianne. Sure, perhaps that's just the way Sally Rooney writes her characters. Again, I don't know. I haven't read the books, but yeah, I couldn't help but think about things I liked about normal people while watching Conversations with Friends. And it isn't fair when you should try and approach this in a vacuum. However, anyone who's read the books was also doing this when they watched normal people because they had both books in their mind. And as far as I
mhm.
know, the Conversation with Friend book is more highly regarded than the Normal People book. However, I think it's pretty obvious that the Normal People series will be more highly regarded than the Conversation with Friends series. And that's okay. I don't think Conversation with Friends the series is bad by any means. I still think there's a lot to like about it. It just doesn't rise up and transcend so much the way Normal People the series did.
So why don't we start with that? Because I feel like we have kind of started this review off on a negative foot. What were the aspects of season one of Conversations with Friends that you liked?
Yeah, well, I think again, like it's very smart that they have the same creative team around Sally Rooney adapting and creating this with Abramson and Birch. It still looks awesome, when they go to Croatia, when they're in Ireland, whatever it is. Uh, I really like it, and I think it all makes sense. It feels very real, you know, and I think that's good. It's also, I think, kind of cool that they have, because we have four characters. We don't have four unknowns here. We actually have two knowns. We have Joe Alwyn and Jemima Kirk, who are. I think I'm more exposed to Jemima Kirk, to be honest. But Joe Alwyn, in smaller roles, I have enjoyed. Things like The Favorite come to mind. They're both good performers, and Kirk is given less to do than I expected when I started watching the series. But I
Mhm.
still think they do really well. And Sasha Lane really grew on me as Bobby, someone who I think I'd only seen, I guess, in small role in Loki, but I thought
Yeah.
she was quite engaging as well. And Alison Oliver as Francis also grew on me. The thing that I think the series is just it didn't grab me in the beginning as much, but once I was a bit closer to the story and had been in it for a few hours, I think that's where I started to like it a bit more, even if I have some quibbles to pick about stuff with the plot. But yeah, I think overall
Mhm.
it looks really nice. Performances are good. It's just I think the key like narrative tension that just doesn't lend itself as well to making a series is all.
Yeah, and, I think, as you kind of pointed out, the series does get stronger as it goes on, and I think that's partially a uh, mechanic of the script and the plot development. I mean, just inherently, you have a main character who is very guarded, very within herself, very emotionally like immature, and so as she's grappling with these things going on, she's not telling you so much about like how she's feeling, even as her relationship, even as Francis's relationship with Nick begins to grow. A lot of their conversations are very like they're very quiet. I mean, people are whispering all over the show. I could have used a little bit
Yeah,
louder. Just talk a little bit louder for me.
yeah.
But
Two
they
introverts, man.
they are yeah, they are both introverts who are just not able to really express themselves. And so while you definitely can take away some things from their physical performance, I think it just makes it hard to totally like sit with these characters.
Right.
I think about why Jemima Kirk and Sasha Lane probably jumped off to me so much. They're much more expressive
Mhm.
throughout the show when you do get time with them, and that's communicating something more to me than a lot of the interactions we get with Nick and Francis. But near the end, like the conversation they have in the bar about Nick's mental health issues the year before Francis meets him, I thought Alwyn gives a really awesome monologue there. I thought both him and
Mhm.
Oliver were really strong in that scene. And a lot of these scenes near the end where they're being more expressive with their emotions, I just found to be so much more enjoyable and captivating. And
Yeah.
I hope if there's a season two, we get a lot more of that than like these like toned down whispers in a room and than a sex scene. Because while the sex scenes, sure, great, it's like nice to see beautiful people like being with each other. Like it really wasn't adding much to me for me by like
Right.
the end of the season. So
Yeah, totally. I think these sex scenes are still intimate, but they're not quite as explicit as the ones in normal people. Still
mhm.
natural though, it's not like you're watching porn. I think that's very admirable that it's like portrays like accurate sex scenes on the screen. It's good. Um, yeah, I think that's the thing with me. It's like a lot of these, like I feel like Nick and Francis, especially in the beginning, like they're not like super fun to be with or the
Yeah.
most likable characters I've ever seen. It's like I think a big part of this too is like it's not just like star-crossed lovers like normal people, which is much easier to wrap your head around and get invested in. In conversation with friends, we're talking about like infidelity.
Yeah.
It's a lot grayer, and I think when Frances is like getting her heart broken by Nick's unwillingness to communicate how he feels about her or whether he's going to commit or not, and like she's just can't get over it. And like finally, Bobby basically like says it. It's like like you're the mistress, or like he's
Yeah.
cheating on his wife with you. Like grow up a little bit. Like this is not supposed to fuck you up like this, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that was a bit of a sticking point with me a little bit, where it's like it's like I'm just not invested as much as like this conflict for you because like like it's infidelity, and like Bobby actually says it. Don't be moralistic about this. It's his job to worry about his own marriage, which is fine. It's right, but like I just couldn't help but like be super just a little frustrated, I guess, with like the fact that this is also a very introverted, quiet character who can't express herself. And it's like, okay, well, like have a little ownership of where you're at in this life. I think
Hmm.
for what I understand, the book does a better job of explaining her thoughts on money, and like they kind of reference the fact that she's a communist in the first episode. They never really touch it again in the series. I think that's a bit more explained to the reader in the book, from what I understand. But like they're just I think a bunch of ticks with like the Francis character, where it's like I just want you to get the shit together a little bit better is all. And
Mhm.
I think for some people they probably really like seeing a character like this, but for me it was a bit frustrating as well.
Yeah, the conversation with a friend, not really a friend at this point, that really I think hit home for me was when Francis in the last episode calls Jemima Kirk, calls Melissa to like ask her why she shared the story she wrote about her breakup with Bobby that's being published, and caused Bobby to you know unfriend her, defriend her, however you want to put it. And Jemima Kirk delivers, I think, probably what I was like screaming in my head the whole time, like, your actions have consequences. Like, you are responsible for the choices that you make. And I think that that's such a fair criticism, as and I was so fascinated. I wish we saw more of what was going on with Nick and Melissa as they navigated this third party into their relationship. And obviously it's not the first time something like that happened. They reference Melissa's infidelities quite a few times in the season. But I find that so fascinating to like see how they communicate and come to an agreement and understanding of how this third person is going to kind of uh, interact within their marriage. And I think the criticisms that Bobby has of Frances, of her being, self-centered, of her feeling like other people's feelings aren't real all the time, really is like a point that stuck out to me, because it feels like she's just kind of like, oh, I have this boyfriend who has this other person who he's married to, and she just didn't like expect them to be fucking, and didn't expect them to be having like intimate moments. It was like kind
Yeah,
of bizarre at times, and I think highlights the character as someone who is flawed, and that's important. I think if she was a perfect protagonist, this wouldn't be interesting at all. But definitely did not find it as fun of a hang to be watching this affair. Although I do think they do a pretty good job of
mm,
coloring in the gray areas of like why Melissa may be okay with this going on, or why
right.
like they might negotiate that in their relationship.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I don't have a whole lot more to say. I think part of it's just the challenge of adaptation sometimes, but also just I think because it's a more complicated scenario, it's just harder to figure out where you as a viewer lie. Like I said, normal people much more straightforward, which is not a bad thing
Mhm.
at all. I think if anything, it just helps you get invested faster. So I'm still happy I watched the series, and I wouldn't be surprised that if Sally Rooney's third novel that came out last fall eventually gets adapted as well. There hasn't been any news on that at this point. You mentioned the season two. I mean, as far as I know, this was a full adaptation of the novel. So
Mhm.
if we were to get a season two, it would have to be like a Big Little Lies season two kind of thing, where the author helps adapt a new season of a series, even though the book has already been wrapped up. So interesting thought. I wonder if Hulu and BBC are interested in going that way. Um, but I think I'd probably be more interested in just seeing that third book, seeing what's up with that, because I'm probably not going to read the book, so I'll just wait for the show.
Yeah, I would like a. I think I'd like a second season just to see like how things play out between Nick and Bobby, as it seems like Francis is like pitting them against each other to fight. But even as I'm saying it, I'm like almost exhausted by it. So maybe not. Maybe just go on to the third book. um.
Yeah,
Anyways, conversation with friends. Check it out. Let us know what you think in the comments below. But let's move forward to the mid-season finale of Better Call Saul, season 6. Uh, Dave, we reviewed the first two episodes. I think we both were high on the way the season starts off, and I think Saul as a TV show is just consistently good. I was kind of left wondering though, like, why did we need a mid-season finale? I know Breaking Bad did something similar, but like,
right.
did you feel like it was really like necessary?
Well, they basically came out and said that it wasn't intentional, it wasn't filmed in this way. It was more of a production related issue where they basically had to release the series in this way, and it just made sense. So I guess that kind of lets them off the hook that this wasn't really the intention of Vince Gilligan when he's making the series, and I think I think I think part of that is due to the health issues that happened with Bob Odenkirk, where the series basically had to
Yeah.
stop. I think that's part of it, and I guess what that would tell us is that the subsequent uh, 6 episodes that will come back starting July 11th. They're just not finished. I think that's
Mm.
what we're being told by this. So yeah, it didn't need a mid-season finale. It's not something that I necessarily wanted, even though, like you said, I think Breaking Bad actually did it pretty effectively. Um, I'm curious how Stranger Things it's going to feel with Stranger Things at the end of this week when we get most, but not all, of the season at once. So yeah, it's not necessary, but in the case of Saul, keeping the Saul train going just a little bit longer because you love it so much, uh, I'll take a 6 week break to stew over it. Yeah,
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's the right take is that if we get more Saul, like just take it at this point because this show is operating at such a high level. Even though I think that there's a couple episodes in this first part of the last season that felt like filler or almost just trying to like slow it down a little bit to stretch it a little bit more, stretch the story out a bit. I definitely always found myself enjoying the time with these characters and I just was like remarking last night as we're going to talk about the shocking mid season finale ending. I just kind of found myself like reflecting on where the show started and where it came to and where it's like ended up being. You know, it really
yeah,
was in those earlier seasons very methodical, very much had that experience of Jimmy McGill in the early stages of becoming a lawyer, pushing
right.
paper,
Doc
literally delivering
review.
the mail. Yes, and it was very much like interested in those details, and now certainly like it still cares about those details, and I think the show is incredibly meticulous still. Um,
Mm.
it's just kind of gotten to like that Breaking Bad level where like crazy shit is happening. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
pretty nuts now.
yeah. I think having seen this full set of this first half of the final season, it honestly is a lot of really awesome payoff for all the early Saw stuff you just mentioned, specifically Kim and Jimmy's scheme, grand plan to ruin Howard. Because all of that is funded on what came before the core of Saul, before Saul got increasingly closer to the cartel plots, which of course would bring us right into Breaking Bad. So the way that they've Gilligan and Gould have brought the Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad worlds together on Better Call Saul continues to impress me. You can go on Reddit and see what people think. I think when once we learned that Howard was hiring a PI, I think everyone was like, "Oh, is Howard going to ruin Kim's career? Is that what's going
Yeah.
to happen to Kim?" You know, I don't think anyone saw what we got coming, of course, but I really enjoyed like seeing Sandpiper and Schweikert and HHM come back into the fold
Hmm.
again. Is like it felt like a great, tying of the knot for everything that came before, but also still makes a lot of sense for what we're seeing with the cartel plots. And I mean, the fact that it's so compelling, so tension filled, when in reality there's now only two characters left that we don't directly know their fates, which would be
Mm.
Lalo and Kim. So, in a sense, you'd think that would answer questions and alleviate tension, but it does anything but because we're so invested in Kim. And earlier in the season, we got one of those answers, which was what's up with Nacho, what's going to happen to him. And I think it
Mm.
went the only way it really could, but it was still incredibly compelling watching him try and survive as long as he could, and then having this honestly heartbreaking final call to his oblivious father, but then
Yeah.
getting to go out on his own terms the way he does. Um, I thought Michael Mando was awesome
Hmm.
in that final episode. So uh, now we're still left with what's up with Lalo, what's going to happen to Kim, and we expect to finally find out what happens in the present timeline with Jimmy now as Gene, in the black and white scenes. So there's still so much like plot you want to learn about, but for what we got so far, I thought it was really effective at tying off some loose ends in compelling ways.
Yeah. I completely agree on the Nacho point and on the point about Rhea Seahorn's Kim and Tony Dalton's Lalo. Those are characters that starting off. Well, Lalo kind of comes in halfway, but like Nacho, Kim, and Lalo throughout the series have just been I think the highlights for me. And obviously, like Odenkirk, Michael Banks, Esposito are all firing on all
Mhm.
cylinders. I think I've really enjoyed seeing like the Mike Gus dynamic in
Yeah.
this season, and like
Mhm.
where you see them in Breaking Bad, they're such like a united front and kind of like on the same page all the time.
Right,
And
of
here,
course.
seeing them butt heads and go about things differently and kind of build that trusting relationship, I thought was just really fun to watch. But yeah, why don't we talk about the ending moment and kind of just Patrick Fabian as Howard in general,
Yeah.
who I think is just like dynamite in this whole like the whole series, but really this season. I think he is just pitch perfect as Howard, as a a character that's increasingly become more complicated. You kind of see him as very one dimensional, cold, calculated lawyer who's just like dedicated to almost like machine like
Mm.
in the way he goes about his work, and the way he makes decisions, and how his relationship with Chuck, draws the ire of Jimmy and kind of leads Jimmy to uh, focus some of his negative behaviors on him. But where like that final scene with Howard, where he's just undressing them and Lalo comes in. I mean, that was just like a holy shit moment. Like the candle kind of
Oh
flicking,
god.
as Howard entered, and then you see it again, and then you just see Lalo like fucking Jaws behind him. Like it was
Mhm.
just like incredible. I
I
just
know.
was like so struck by that, and I was like, yeah, Gilligan still got it. Now, I think I've seen a lot of people really loving it, and I think there were parts of it where I was like, oh man, like that wasn't how I wanted Howard to go out, and I also didn't know if that's necessarily like how I was hoping like the season would turn. But as I've sat with it more today, I'm just like, yeah, there was a great TV moment. I literally was like, what the fuck, like after it ended, and
Mhm.
uh, Dalton's just so great too. So yeah, talk a little bit about your thoughts on Fabian in this season.
Right, well, I think it's really brilliant because they do such a good job of paying off this scheme from Jimmy and Kim in this episode where they embarrass Howard and ruin HHM's chance at getting a bigger settlement from Schweigart for the Sandpiper, uh, you know, elderly people, a plot point
Mhm.
that's been ongoing since early part of the show. But when you watch Howard get ruined, uh, professionally in that manner by Jimmy and Kim, and you see it in unfolding. You're always rooting for Jimmy and Kim, but like it's really the first time that you really feel for Howard in such a genuine way because he's always been just kind of a tertiary antagonist, like as you said, in relationship to Chuck and whatnot. And to see that go down, but also see that uh, he's still very capable. Howard's still really capable, and he
Mhm.
immediately sees what's happened to him, but
Yeah,
he can't convince anyone else that that's actually true. And
it's so ridiculous.
yeah, of course. And then when he goes to the house and he's like, you just get off on this. You guys just think this is fun. You guys are fucked up people, aren't you? And it's
Mhm.
like, you know what? They are. And the
Yeah.
fact that we just see them, like, it's kind of like a swan song for Howard's character, which I think the post Chuck's death was a character that didn't serve as much of a narrative purpose, moment to moment in those the past like 2 seasons or so, right? But it's such a great swan song for the character because not only does it bring Jimmy and Kim fully back into the cartel the way it does, obviously because of Lalo here, but it was I didn't see the Howard character having a grace note like this. I didn't think it would be nearly this interesting. But they'd set up for half a season's arc to get us to this point, and they just executed flawlessly in this episode.
Yeah, and they really do a good job, I think, of building out Howard as a character this season. You see him like go to therapy. You see the relationship with his wife at home and what that's like, and just kind of how he has like these two sides to him that really um conflict. This one very emotional side and this one very like cold, calculated lawyer side. And I think building that out not only helps you to really like Howard more, because I mean, for a lot of the series, while I think you understand Jimmy's being a huge asshole to Howard through all this and undeservingly targeting him for his feelings towards his brother and their relationship, um, Howard doesn't necessarily come across as sympathetic a lot of the time. He's pretty cut and dry as like the head of this company, and like I've said a dozen times now, very much like calculated and just focused on the mission of how do I win this case, or how do I manage this? And so building him as a character this season, I thought they did a wonderful job of that. Really makes that final moment for him even more effective. And yeah, I mean, it just that moment also, you can literally feel the terror in the room. Very similar to the moment. I can't remember if it was season 5 or season 4 when Lalo confronts Kim, and I think it was last season, season 5, when he confronts Kim and Jimmy the uh in their home before, and Mike has the sniper rifle on him, and it's just that tension, that air
Right.
gets sucked right out of the room, and you're just
Same director.
terrified. And yeah, and Tony Dalton, man, I mean, his performance of Lalo, just like I mentioned, kind of is like that Jaws character, just
Yeah.
lurking through a lot of this season, kind of piecing together what is Gus doing. Going to what, he went to Denmark, right? Like it was,
Yeah. I mean, bringing back Varner's
yeah,
widow into it, I was like, holy shit! Did not expect
yeah,
to see this. This is crazy. And then we see Lalo in his psychopathic glory sitting in the fucking sewer spying on the lab. It's like, oh my god, this is amazing.
hilarious moment when you just see his head pop up. Like I was
Yeah.
just like, this
Oh,
is
he's fucking
incredible. Like who thinks of
Pennywise.
this? Yeah, for real. Yeah, amazing moment. And he's so, his ability to like go from being so charming to so psychopathic like so quickly is just like,
Yeah.
man, he's operating at such a high level on this. And that call between him and Hector, when Hector's like pressing the button because he knows that the phone is wiretapped, and he notices afterwards, like that's the type of shit that only Saul does this well. I guess like Saul and like David Simon like does this sort
Yeah,
of stuff like
totally.
this well. So
Right.
really like a pleasure to watch.
Right, and like I didn't see the very ending that we got because like I was like, oh, Lalo sees through the fact that they're tapping him. They set up that Mike and Gus are gonna go all hands on deck, protect Gus at the secret safe house, and then Lalo's just gonna waltz into the lab that's lightly guarded and fuck shit up. I was like, okay, cool. Wow, that's gonna be awesome. I didn't expect to see Lalo go directly back to Jimmy and Kim, and then off Howard, obviously. So I'm curious to see where the cartel stuff picks back up because you know that Lala's going to the lab soon. But what does he need to know from Jimmy and Kim? What does he need them to do for him? I have no idea.
Yeah, definitely interested. I can't wait to see what the last half of this has. I mean, any predictions for the part 2? I mean, we know we're going to see Cranston and I
Aaron Paul.
Clemens, yeah, at some point. But
Not Plemons, Aaron Paul.
oh, Aaron Paul. Sorry. Wow. Yeah,
I
you're
mean,
right.
I guess we could see Plemons. He's alive in this timeline.
Yeah,
Probably not. Wasn't he in El Camino a little bit in flashbacks? So
yeah, I think so.
yeah, yeah. I have really no idea how we're gonna see Walt and Jesse. I'm really curious what that is. Um, I can't imagine present day Gene is gonna go find Jesse in the middle of fucking nowhere. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's gonna be a flashback of some kind. I just don't know how it connects to the plot. Is because like I really have no I really don't know. Um,
Yeah,
and
me neither.
I don't really have predictions for anything else either. I'm just really curious to see what the fuck happens with Kim. Lalo. We know that Lalo isn't going to succeed because Don Eladio and Gus Fring and Mike Ehrmantraut, they're all alive and in their power in Breaking Bad. So we know
Yep.
that Lalo isn't going to win, but he's going to do something big, and I want to know what that
Mhm.
is.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that. I want you to plant your flag. Does Kim survive the series?
Yeah, I saw some people saying that maybe she does survive and like is off on her own in present day, and then they reconnect. I don't think it's gonna be that happy. I think something bad happens. I don't know how.
Yeah,
I think she's gone. I
I have
think she's toast.
I have the same feeling that she's probably not going to make it. But last night's episode made me think, maybe she is. I think having so many characters off at this point, and also like thinking about how we haven't gotten any of the flash forwards this season.
Right.
I mean, is Gene? It feels like there has to be some sort of like redemption arc for Gene. It can't just be like he's this disgraced Cinnabon worker now. I don't know. Feels like there has to be something more to it, but we'll see. I mean, maybe he goes to find Jesse Plemons. Or sorry, Jesse Plemons. Jesse is his name in the show. That's why I'm
Jesse
getting so
Pinkman.
confused. Aaron Paul. Jesse Pinkman, yeah. Maybe he goes to find Aaron Paul, but like that'd be so random. Like, just gonna go hang out with this guy who I had like
Gosh.
I don't know 3 hours of interaction with in total. I don't know. It's strange. So
Yeah.
we'll see where it ends, but you got to watch Saul, man. It's so good.
Yeah. It'll be good, whatever it is, and I have no doubt.
Why don't we wrap up today with Atlanta season 3? Last
Ooh.
episode aired this past weekend, and Atlanta is a show that we love for performances. We love for the way it tells stories and conceptualizes things. And Atlanta this season was just like, we know you love us for this, but we're just going to do it our way. And this season, I think, challenged a lot of people. I
Oh, it
definitely
did.
challenged me at points. And I'm wondering, did you leave this season being like, Atlanta is still top tier, or are you like, maybe they took a step back this time?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I think Atlanta is the bona fides have been established. We both had this show in our best shows of the decade, even though we only had seen 2 seasons of said show. Season 1 and 2 are certified in that regard. And season 3 is super challenging. I think the show's still got it. Whether you're satisfied and directly entertained can be two different things, and I think
Hmm.
the effectiveness of what you watch really depends on what lens you're approaching Atlanta season 3. By far the most polarizing season of the series, most unpredictable season of the series. I think in a sense, I appreciate the creativity because from what we understand, Lakeith Stanfield, Brian Tyree Henry, Donald Glover, Zazie Beetz, they're all stars now. They are busy fucking people. So they couldn't be together as much as they could in the past season. So in a sense, this was their workaround. I don't know if I necessarily expected to see 3 complete one-off episodes and then a bunch of other basically like non sequiturs around like one character. It's not that like a non sequitur or something that seems insignificant is new to Atlanta. Of course it is. We don't watch Al become the biggest rapper in Atlanta. It's all off screen. We haven't watched Al become an international rap star either. That's also happened on screen with this season. It's all about these other little interludes. That's what's interesting to them. And yeah, I think this is a very fascinating season because I definitely didn't expect it to go this way.
Me neither. Pretty much like every other episode was this non main crew episode that was exploring these one off stories, whether it's the Robert S. Lee High School Rich Wigger Poor Wigger episode, whether it was them exploring uh what was it in like the early season.
They
I'm
had
like totally
they had the
blanking
one
right
with
now.
about reparations with Justin
Yes,
Bartha.
yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes. So that one. I mean, they really were trying to go for something, right? Even the beginning of the season starts off with none of the main characters, but this story about black people being killed in that lake in Atlanta that I'm totally blanking on
Yeah.
as well. But
Right.
they really tried a lot of stuff, but it did take you away from the parts that really make the show, I think, hum and great. If you were getting Seinfeld without Jerry and George together for multiple episodes on end, or if you were getting Elaine just singularly with other characters that we don't know, you're gonna kind of be like, well, I don't know. This isn't why I watch Seinfeld, and I'm not saying that this made the season of Atlanta bad, but it just
Yeah.
wasn't what I wanted, and that's I think what the show was really trying to get at this season. I suspect season 4 will be more of the gang together as the final season, and I assume that they've probably thought about what they want to say about Atlanta in general as a place and what it means to them. But this season, they really were like, "Yep, we're not going to give you anything that you really want,"
Hmm.
and it was definitely challenging at times, but still a lot of really memorable moments. So I think there's a lot to still like.
Yeah. Because like I think they're still going and trying to comment and say things the way they do in typical Atlanta fashion. It's just as you said, you're not getting it in the way you expect. We have these 4 characters, these 4 performers that have really high approval ratings. Brian Tyree Henry, one of the best actors working right now, full stop. That's beyond a doubt. I think at this point, Lakeith as well, right up there. Um, but I would rather like see them give these comments off, right, than these one off episodes. I
Hmm.
think there's still tons of moments of brilliance when you do see our core cast in spurts. I thought the new Jazz episode was brilliant. The way they bring in Liam Neeson playing himself in the Cancel Club,
What a
complete
moment!
heel turning at the end too. Oh my god, dude!
Yeah, and
They get such buy-in from their guests, whether it's Neeson or
Skarsgård,
Skarsgård in the finale, obviously.
Chet Hanks just basically like being himself in it. I was like, damn, they're all really in on it. And yeah, just to talk about the Neeson thing, he very much could have used this as like a way to kind of like walk back things and be
Yeah,
like, yeah, I
launder
learned
his
from it.
personality for black people.
And when he
Yeah,
takes that turn in his monologue where he's like, "No, I can't stand a lot of you," my mouth literally dropped to the floor. I was like, "Liam Neeson is on TV saying this on like one of the most
yeah,
popular shows." Like, and I get that that episode was kind of framed as like a drug induced dream
right.
for
Classic
uh
Amsterdam.
yeah, for Alfred. But man, that moment. I just like literally couldn't believe it. I thought that was incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think this season did rely a lot on like some of those guest appearances, though. Like you mentioned the Skarsgård one. What was your temperature on that?
yeah. I thought the Skarsgård performance again. You have such buy-in. Like he's playing a guy who gets off on being like completely negged by his girlfriend, right? Literally jerking off after what happens to him. It's like
Hmm.
dancing in underwear and stuff. It's really fun to see Skarsgård just play a weirdo like that, but playing himself, playing the weirdo. Um, a bit more of on the provocation side of things is in the Rich Wigga episode. You have Kevin Samuels coming in, obviously a very polarizing, recently passed figure, probably much more, I think, well known in the black community than in general culture. But having him be the one who's like being the benefactor for all black students at the school, it's like, oh wow, but you have Kevin Samuels being the one
Hmm.
expounding that. Interesting, thought provoking, I suppose. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think overall, I like these guys. Even Justin Bartha, nice to see him. Obviously,
Hmm.
shout out The
Yeah.
Hangover. In the reparations episode, I thought he did a really good job, and I thought that was my favorite of the one-off episodes, pretty easily, because I thought it was definitely really thought provoking. Obviously, I think us watching it as white people definitely probably have a different reaction than other people watching it, people of color, black people for sure. But like watching them like play out this like reparations scenario in this way, it's like wow. It's just I think like the whole Donald Glover, Stephen Glover, Stephanie Robinson creative force with this show. At the end of the day, they're making you think a lot, but they managed to get thematically even I think bigger with this series, or at least switch it up a little bit. Blackness has been a huge aspect of the first two seasons,
Hmm.
and how blackness affects these characters and how they interface in the world. They take it a step further in season three because it's almost more about how whiteness affects people in the world, both white people and also how it affects black people, and usually how it affects people negatively. And I was really impressed with how they kind of thematically kind of like took that next step forward in this regard, especially in a series that, like you said, often feels more like the Twilight Zone than it
Yeah.
does Atlanta season one and two. So I think there's a lot to admire here, and it definitely increases my anticipation for season four because I want to see what the hell it is.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm very interested to see. I mean, it's hard to predict anything with this show, but we do get a bit of a stinger at the end where the white Ernest Marks, Ern gets a bag for the white Ernest Marks, and it very much feels like a horror vibe to it.
Mm,
So I feel like there's going to be something about that dynamic that's probably going to be a running through line. But I also have to suspect, kind of like I was mentioning before, that in this fourth season, they're going to probably not be in Europe. I
I
imagine
think
that they
so.
have to go back to Atlanta, and I also imagine that they have to kind of like try to tie together why the show is called Atlanta and what it really means to them, what it's supposed to symbolize in terms of blackness and race politics, in terms of what they're going for in the show. I one of the episodes that really stands out to me is that one where they're having the party. I think it was the old man in the tree, episode
Oh,
3.
I love that one. That was
Gr-
great. That was the most
Great
classic
episode.
Atlanta episode, traditional one, I
Yes,
think.
and I loved almost what everybody was doing there. But the aspect that I found to be most interesting was the rich guy who was funding the black artist who everybody thought was just terrible, and they were like, "Yeah, like we know, but like, why
Get
are
the
you gonna
bag,
spoil
bro.
this for us?" Exactly. And that was I think one of the things I found most appealing about this season in terms of the main characters was you see Ern become competent, which is really nice, and you also see
Yeah.
him and his relationship with Alfred really growing. After Alfred has that fever dream, he asks him who has his masters. Now it's a bit on the nose, and it's maybe not the most creative writing that the show has ever done, but it really is I think an important moment to like build the connection between these characters, and you kind of
Mm.
get some of those moments between Darius and Van earlier in the season as they're kind of gallivanting around parts of Europe together as Alfred and Ern are doing some of their own stuff. So I thought it was nice to see the character development when we got it. Just wish we got more of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Are you ready to wrap up?
In all likelihood, we'll be talking about season 4 later in this year. They shot these back to back. They said it's coming out this year, so probably in the fall, I'd have to imagine. So it's been a hell of a run, and can't wait to see what's next. I don't think they're going out on a low note, that's for sure. So we'll be highly anticipating that.
I agree. So let's wrap it up there. What do we got for next week, Dave?
So next week we got, I think, a few really important things here. Top Gun Maverick, the hype is high. We Own This City has been going great on HBO. Obi-Wan Kenobi, first 2 episodes coming out on Disney Plus. Also, Norm Macdonald, the late Norm Macdonald, filmed a comedy special that we're getting on Netflix. And we'll probably chime in on Survivor season 42 as well, which is wrapping up this week. So, and who knows, maybe Star Wars Celebration throws some unexpected news and announcements
Mm,
for us. TBD there.
let's hope. So follow us at Nostalgia Pod on Twitter and hit that subscribe on youtube.com/nostalgiapod. We'll catch you next week.